Welcome to Intentionality with Dominique, the show that helps business owners become valued and in-demand suppliers in the marketplace to scale their businesses. Let's start today's show with host and intentional connector, Dominique Simpson-Milton.
Welcome to Intentionality. I am your host, Dominique Simpson-Milton. According to statistics, the majority of businesses fail within the first 5 years. Thus, we must be intentional to gain knowledge, skills, and connections that will improve the probability of success in business. The mission of this show is to improve the success rate of entrepreneurs and show them how to become valued and in-demand suppliers in the marketplace so they can scale their businesses. The guests featured on this show are all members of the CVMSDC, which is the Carolinas, Virginia Minority Supply Development Council, also known as the Council. CVMSDC is an economic growth engine for ethnic minority business owners and serves as an advocacy group to help these businesses and their owners become certified, get developed, experience connection and advocacy. Today's show is sponsored by our friends at Altria, which has a long-standing track record of working with diverse suppliers. On today's show, I am excited to welcome my friend Lisa Blake, Senior Manager of Supply Diversity and Inclusion at Altria. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I appreciate you being here, but I also appreciate you being a sponsor of this show because it shows and it proves that Altria stands behind the work that they do.
Absolutely.
So, Lisa, tell us, what does Altria do? Because a lot of our viewers just don't know.
Altria is actually the tobacco leader in the tobacco industry, and we produce various products, reduced harm products, cigarettes, combustible products, reduced harm, e-vapor products, pipe tobacco, and large machine-made cigars.
Wow. Did I ever tell you that Altria was my first customer when I was at MBE?
No, tell me about it.
Yes, absolutely. So we supplied research professionals, and we provided research professionals to Altria to produce the products that they produce. And I worked with Connie. So
wonderful.
Yes, she helped us. She was very instrumental through the Supply Diversity and Inclusion Program to help us get into Altria.
Wow, yeah, Connie is actually my muse. I'm really honored that she received the Legends Award at the recent conference.
That is outstanding. So what is Supplier Diversity and Inclusion at Altria?
Supplier diversity and inclusion is woven into the fabric of who we are. We are very intentional, speaking of intentionality, in making sure we engage diverse suppliers in our supply chains because it does increase competitiveness, innovation, and flexibility in our supply chain. And we have a new vision.
What is that?
Altria's vision is to responsibly lead the transition of adult smokers to a smoke-free future.
Really?
So that may sound very interesting when you think about the tobacco industry. So when we're thinking about supplier diversity, my role is to be to engage those diverse suppliers in our supply chain because we know that they're flexible, they're competitive, and they work extra hard to make sure that they align with our business requirements.
That's excellent. I was explaining to somebody, I said, if you build a widget, or if you build a smokeless tobacco product, right?
Yes.
And you do it with a homogeneous room,
Yes.
that product is going to come out one way. But if you bring people into the room who are older, younger, have diverse backgrounds, different colors, different ethnicities, your product, the output is going to look differently.
Right. It has been proven to work.
Right.
Absolutely.
And those companies who engage diverse people on their design teams, their suppliers, they are more profitable, would you say?
I would definitely say that. And as a matter of fact, when I took over in 2020, the notorious year of 2020, that was really one of our goals, to move that thought from a philanthropic effort to a business imperative. It's not only important that it doesn't move only our company forward, but also in the communities in which we work and live. So supplier diversity is at the forefront. We have strong leadership engagement, and all of our employees are also engaged in moving that needle forward.
So let's stop on that point because
Sure.
a lot of our corporate entities don't understand that, right? They say, okay, we're going to do supply diversity and inclusion because it seems to be the right thing to do, right? And that's where, that's maybe how we started, right?
Absolutely.
So it is the right thing to do, but it's an economic imperative. There's an economic impact that occurs when you are intentional in supply diversity. So corporations, what the research that we've done, it says that there's a 330-year wealth gap in America.
Yes.
And that's sad.
That is very sad.
That's sad.
Yes, it is.
But what do we do to change that, right? And so that same study said if every corporation were to increase their investment with suppliers by 1%, that's every corporation, we could close that wealth gap in 15 years.
Absolutely. And I'm very involved in that. Powerfully focused is was my mantra for supplier diversity.
So let's talk about you being powerfully focused,
Sure.
right? So what has Lisa Blake done at Altria to make a difference?
I actually smile when I'm asked that question because I can't help but I use my marketing background. So when I took over, I wanted to inject energy and enthusiasm because if I'm leading the program and I'm kind of just sitting here like let's talk about supplier diversity, I won't engage.
Right.
So the first thing that I did was kind of create an army.
Okay.
So in in Altria, we've had a 42-year program.
Okay.
So we are kind of ahead of the game. However, with the long-standing program, things tend to be a little typical. So because of my marketing background, we've created an army. So not just a network, but we make all Altria employees accountable for supplier diversity, whether they have supplier relationships or not. Because if you don't, you can still be an advocate. So that's one of the first things that I did. We completely rebranded the logo.
Okay.
It was blue and white. So of course, we think about diversity, we have color.
Yeah, well, all those colors. In the
Absolutely.
logo.
So
Right.
we have colors in our mosaic, and we have colors that align in our supplier diversity program. So we created awareness, and then we also created a new model, which is called Supplier Diversity Amplified. So that's our internal branding, where we have 4 pillars.
Okay.
One is our diverse supplier strategy, and that aligns with our tier 1, so
Okay.
our direct suppliers. Then we have a tier 2 strategy,
Okay.
because as we always state at the CVMSDC and Altria, tier 2 opportunities still create income.
It's money.
Right,
green.
it's money.
They're
It's green.
Right.
It's green.
Right.
So we also have a very strong tier 2 program in that space. And it's also important to get internally engaged. So that's our third pillar, and where we work with various leadership, project managers, category managers, our employees, and our employee resource groups and business resource groups. So that way, everyone knows about what supplier diversity is. Then it's also important to create compliance. We have a
Okay.
culture of compliance in Altria. So we looked at our contracts, we looked at our procedures to see how we can be more progressive in that space and call attention. It's a real call to action when we now include supplier diversity and inclusion within our contracts and in our compliance procedures.
So it sounds like a whole philosophy.
It's
I
a
think
whole
that's
philosophy.
where a lot of corporations miss. So for our corporations that are listening, right?
Yes.
The way to be successful, you said 42 years.
Yes.
The way to be successful is to be completely inclusive, which is actually the theme for next year for
Wonderful,
CVMSDC
that's
is
great.
inclusivity. But to be inclusive in the organization, because usually it's one person in the organization that champions supplier diversity. right?
Absolutely.
And that doesn't cut it, right?
does not
Because you
work.
have to get through so many different layers. You have to get to the buyers at the bottom layer.
Yes.
Right. And so to get through the whole organization, I love your approach that you're completely, there's a whole program around it.
Thank
What
you.
about top-down buy-in?
Oh, do I have top-down buy-in?
I know you do, because I met Billy, your CEO, and I know he's
Absolutely.
engaged, right?
So yes, and we all know one of the challenges in supplier diversity and inclusion is the C-suite engagement.
Yes.
Fortunately, I've worked at Altria for 30 years, right, so a long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So people have gotten to know me,
Okay.
including our CEO. So recently with our Business Opportunity Conference that was hosted by the CVMSDC, as you see, Billy was extremely engaged, even in the planning process. So what does that mean to our employees? That at the top level, supplier diversity and inclusion is important. Because I know he gave the welcoming remarks. He even participated in the speaker rehearsal. Like,
Yeah.
who does
He
that,
was there.
right?
I met him on the screen, and I was like, so Billy, who are you? And where do you go? He says, I'm Billy. And I'm like,
Billy.
okay, you're Billy, the CEO. But he
Right.
was there just like everybody else, right? And he was
Absolutely.
at the table. What I love, Lisa,
Yes.
was when he came and did the introduction, he stayed.
Yes, he
didn't-
did.
He didn't get whisked off.
That's right.
He stayed there through the whole luncheon to
Right.
show his engagement. That was rich.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was trying to say, okay, Billy, you can leave. And he said, no, I want to listen. I was like, okay.
Right,
And
right.
not only that, I mean, I was overwhelmed with the amount of leadership engagement we had. So for example, we also had the president of one of our president and CEO of one of our companies, U.S. Smokeless Tobacco. Mike Brace was there. We had our VP of Procurement, Jody Clark, my direct managers and directors, Frank Giovanello and Linwood, and of course, even a member of our supply chain, Wilson Friend. So when we took the picture, I really actually honestly almost teared up because it's difficult, right, to get that type of engagement. And I must say that was one of the highlights of my supplier diversity career, was to have that much buy-in.
That was powerful.
Absolutely.
That was powerful. So for our listeners, particularly our corporate listeners, because we want to challenge them, right?
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that every corporation understands what it takes to really move the needle in supplier diversity and inclusion, right? So again, full circle involvement, top down, expecting and inspecting, right? So you measure your results, right?
Absolutely.
Talk about the measurement.
Well, one thing about supplier diversity is very important. One metric is spend, right? And we do have a goal that we're actually tracking faster than we thought, so I'm very happy about that. So what we've done is, we do have our normal practices, spend analytics to make sure, we're tracking properly. And we use those numbers to build or dismantle infrastructure. So we always think about building infrastructure, but never think about what things in our program may not be working for us,
I like
right?
that, yes.
And not only that, this number, that's one thing that that I've learned as a supplier diversity manager, that it's not just about the number.
It's not.
Right? It's not just about the number, even though we're tracking well. But it's also about community engagement. It's about stakeholders. It's about really having it in your heart. Because if there's not many roles that people have that they can not only build on their business's revenue, but think of these diverse suppliers, they're trying to take care of their families. So they need opportunities. Right? So our program is a holistic program. So of course we have spend, of course we have metrics, and also with Supplier Diversity Amplified, I have a deep and narrow approach into what's going on, because we are a very large organization with offices, throughout the country. So how does Supplier Diversity keep an eye on everything that's going on? And that's really understanding what's going on in RFPs. Are they engaged in RFPs? And that's part of our compliance, that we do make a mandate to make sure that diverse suppliers are engaged. And what happens? What's their path as they engage with Altria? So part of our competitive activities, are you engaged? Do they win? If they win, what's the value of the business? What do they need to make sure that they're successful? And if they're not successful, why? So I make sure that
That's full circle.
A full circle.
I love that.
Because it's really our duty, not only as supplier diversity, but also procurement, to make sure that these diverse suppliers, and all of our suppliers actually, are given feedback as how can they grow if we do not provide directives. And I'm known for providing directives.
You give great feedback. You give me great feedback, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So what we're talking about, you have a full spectrum program.
Yes.
You bring them in, you work with them, and you make sure that they're successful through the network. Let's give a real life example. I'll give myself as an example.
Sure.
When Altria was my first customer,
Yes.
that helped me put food on the table, right?
Absolutely.
So it helped me put 3 kids through college, right?
That's right.
So if you are employing a diverse supplier, $1 invested in that supplier puts $1.72 back into the economy.
Absolutely.
Right? That's economic empowerment. You empower that employee or that now contractor.
That's right.
To be self-sufficient, right?
Absolutely.
And then they can hire other people. They pay taxes. They buy goods and services. So it's like a trickle-down economic impact.
Yes,
Do you have a story from Altria of a supplier that you want to share?
Yes. One that comes to mind is actually a recent historic win for Altria. Very happy. So in 2020, we were very concerned about how we're engaging with our diverse suppliers. So we had a meeting with some diverse businesses and to really gain open and honest feedback on how we can better engage. Out of that, we had a specific supplier, Team Henry, talk about opportunities. How can I engage in your business? Now, timing is everything, right? So after a series of years, actually, we actually have engaged him to manage one of our warehouses. And it was historic because Altria is we have very high standards, as we should. So to have a diverse supplier take on our warehouse of where we hold our products, that's very significant. It may seem small to those in the general law, but that is a huge accomplishment. And I know he was a keynote speaker.
Yes.
And so I'm just trying to get him engaged in various opportunities, and he's doing a great job for our company. And so that's one that I would really like to highlight and that I'm very proud of.
I'm glad you shared that story. And I heard a few things in that for our listeners, right?
Yes.
So for our MBEs, our minority businesses who are listening, the point I want them to take away is that it took years.
It
took years, right?
He
didn't just knock on your door and then all of a sudden he got his car. And he was already a successful businessman,
Absolutely,
right?
yes,
but
he was.
Even as a successful businessman, it took years for him to get the contract, right?
Yes.
So that's key, right? And then you had to work behind the scenes to make sure that it happened. That's the benefit of a supplier diversity professional and organization having your back. Right?
Absolutely.
So you help make sure that people are channeled through and that they're successful through the program.
Absolutely.
So
that is definitely my role. And as I always tell people, I'm the face of it all, right? We set the strategic direction. However, without the engagement of all of our employees, that still would not have happened. So I'm just overjoyed. And we still have work to do. I'm not saying we're perfect at this, but due to the progress that we have made, I couldn't be more than happier.
That is awesome. So Lisa, how many years did you say?
I've been with the company 30 years.
30 years. So now as a supplier diversity and inclusion manager, what's the biggest lesson you've learned and you're going to take away from this work that you've done?
Well, one of the things that I really, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is when I came into the role, very numbers driven. As a business professional, supplier diversity and inclusion manager, I'm focusing on the numbers. But as I learned more about the role, because I was in the network previously, but managing it is very different than participating in it, right? So focusing on the numbers, it was just one thing, but as I learned and grew these relationships, such as with the CVMSDC, it's more. It's more than a number. Actually, I should use that as a tagline.
Right. That's a good tagline.
Yeah, that's a good tagline.
Right.
It's more than a number. And I've just learned that through the power of inclusion, this can work. And that if we just change our minds with the thoughts of diversity, it should not be a hindrance, but open up doors to not only move Altria forward, but all of us forward, because it works.
Yes.
It really does work. So that's something that I learned. It's not a moment, right? It's a movement. That's why I include that in my.
It's not a moment, but a movement.
But it's a movement, and
sometimes
it just takes time.
There you go. So that's excellent advice. Now, as we close out, anything that you would have done differently, or any advice that you want to give to a supplier diversity person who is struggling, trying to develop a program?
I get this question a lot, since many know that we have a long-term program. One thing is really pace yourself, right? I'm very action-oriented, very. And so I tend to push, we got to get this done, And that's just my normal work ethic. However, with supplier diversity and inclusion, you have to be very strategic, very intentional, and very diligent. So you have to keep pressing and don't get frustrated, because sometimes things just don't work. It takes time to get buy-in. But if you have a great narrative to the story of supplier diversity and inclusion, eventually it takes on, it picks up and moves forward. And what's important for people to know, not everyone will accept diversity-related efforts.
Right.
However, ignore the 20%, and those 80% will make it work. So that's how we've been successful, and how we're going to continue to move forward at Altria.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa,
Thank you. It's
for
been
your
a pleasure.
intentionality.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being our sponsor.
Not a problem.
If you are interested in more information on Altria, just visit altria.com. That's ALTRIA.com. Well, that concludes today's episode of Intentionality. Be sure to join me for our next episode. And remember that we must always remain intentional to gain knowledge, skills, and connections so we can grow and thrive in business. Thanks again to our friends at Altria. I'm Dominique Simpson-Milton, and I will see you next time.
This has been another episode of Intentionality with Dominique, brought to you by the CVMSDC. For more information, please visit cvmsdc.org.